So let's transition to the rise of Germany. So Germany factors so much into the Great Depression, and most U.S. teachers do not include this in the bigger picture. But it is absolutely part of why it all happens. So the U.S. does really well right after the war, right? Roaring 20s, everything is good. U.S. didn't sustain any damage during the war. We didn't send that many people over, all things considered. And Europe needs to buy things because they cannot make it themselves. Their factories have been destroyed. Their people have been killed in the war. They need to buy because they can't make it themselves. The U.S. is happy to sell, but Europe can't pay for it. They have no money. They spent their money in fighting the war. So the U.S. is happy to let them buy on credit. But just like when we talked about our margin payments and margin loans, Europe couldn't pay back their credit. So then the sellers don't get paid, which means the factories who made that stuff doesn't get paid, which means the workers who worked in that factory don't get paid, which means the workers don't buy food, so the farmers don't get paid, which means that this whole cycle keeps going and going until it causes a worldwide Great Depression. Germany and those reparation payments and Europe and the destruction of the war is a major contributor to the Great Depression. Not just the stocks and such happening in America. All of this is happening at the same time. This is a key concept. You definitely should know this. So you might remember we talked about this at the end of the war. Kaiser Wilhelm has fled and is in exile. Germany asks for an armistice, and they have their end of the war at 11/11/18. So they have surrendered, and now they wait for peace terms. But many Germans hadn't seen any fighting. It never happened in German territory. They didn't know why they lost. So many Germans called these leaders the November criminals because they had stabbed Germany in the back. They have betrayed Germany when Germany hadn't yet lost. And this armistice causes more problems at home. So 2.5 million Germans died in the war. They're gone. They're not going to help rebuild. 4 million wounded. How many of those wounded would not be able to work again? What do you do with them? Or perhaps they're not able to work like they used to. How do you accommodate them? Nobody had thought of this before the war. Many people were very angry with this new government, this whole November criminal stuff. Hashtag not my Kaiser. Unemployment soars. No one knows what's going to happen. No one knows how bad the punishment of Versailles was going to be. That didn't happen overnight. So imagine when you're called to the principal, and that time between now and going to the principal's office, what are you thinking? What did I do? How bad is this going to be? Or if your parents tell you that, oh, we're going to talk when I get home. You know what that, and in your head, you're just like, what is going to happen? Well, Germany has to go home. And that is the problem. People don't know. And so violence happens. Groups begin rioting. They are upset and they're hungry. People are worried about their next meals. This time is called the Weimar Republic. It's named for where the government was seated at the time. The time of Germany before World War II is called the Weimar Republic, and you definitely should recognize that term. This is a very unstable time. And what we said about the reparations Germany had to pay, they couldn't pay them. So there's this land called the Saar region. You might remember that from your negotiations. The Saar is full of coal mines and steel mills. A lot of money is produced from the Saar. And so when France didn't get its first payment, they say to Germany, well, if you can't pay it, we're just going to invade the Saar and we'll make money off of it. So the United States says, no, no, whoa, whoa, France. We loan Germany money to pay off France so that we don't get another world war. And then Germany can't pay us, compounding this problem, making it worse. Well, what's the other thing you can do when you can't pay stuff? What does every simple person say to, well, if we can't pay money, what should we do? Not loans, even more simple. What should a government do? Even simpler. What would you say? The simplest way, if the government can't pay money, what should you do? Print more money. So, supply and demand. If you increase the supply of something without changing the demand, what happens? What goes down? Price. The value goes down, right? Same thing happens in money. If you simply print more money, every single dollar is worth less. This happens in Germany with the Deutsche Mark. So here is something you won't see in other classes. This is a Deutsche Mark from 1920. Yeah, I'm going to pass them around. In 1920 to 2015 US dollars, it's worth about 17 cents. Right? That's what it occurred. One mark, 17 cents. 1923, 10 million marks, about $23. 1924, 50 million marks, 0.2 of a cent. Now, what's the real problem with this? What does this mean for people? Well, if I had this 50 million mark bill in my pocket in 1920, it would have been worth about $8 million. I would have had $8 million in my pocket. 50 million mark bill. 1920, $8 million. If I had left it in my pocket for 4 years, 1924, it's worth 0.2 of 1 cent. So how much money did I just lose? A lot of money. Even though I didn't do anything, I had money in the bank, right? I could have had a bunch of these in the bank. And all of a sudden, it's worth nothing. So if you have, $100 in your bank account, and all of a sudden a loaf of bread is $500, doesn't mean much. Let's go ahead and pass these around. Yeah, just wherever you want. Take a look, pass them around. Germany can't pay the loan, so they print more money. They pay that off, they get another thing, and repeat. Runaway inflation. Make sure it gets passed before you. Thank you. 1919, 12 marks equals $1. December 1923, 4.2 trillion marks equals $1. No, not the U.S. Venezuela's going through this right now. Yeah. These are children playing with blocks of money as blocks. This man has a wheelbarrow of money to go buy his groceries. This man is sweeping up money in the street. No one is willing to pick it up because it's so worthless. This woman is heating her home by burning money. Or my personal favorite, this man is using money as wallpaper because it's cheaper than actual wallpaper. I think that's great. That's my favorite image of the war. I guess. So the result of this, fear. People are in fear of what do I do for my next meal. All of a sudden, my bank account is worth nothing. That makes people panic. When people panic, people make bad decisions. Bad people, like dictators, like bad politicians, who are happy to take advantage of people making poor decisions. People only want stability. They don't want fear, right? That Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom level of the pyramid is survival. Do I have what I need to live? That people will listen to whoever will promise that stability. And that's why dictatorships happen. If people are fearful enough and are promised enough things, they will welcome dictators. That's why it happens. And that's exactly what happens in Germany. So the Weimar Republic is failing. Inflation is rampant. People have lost faith in the government. Germans are either afraid of what are we going to do for dinner? How am I going to afford a meal? or they're angry at the government being so. So people are listening for solutions. And you can see here children making a kite out of money. How great is that? As people are listening for solutions, this is where we get a small party with some radical ideas. The Nazi Party. They translate to National Socialist. They pick socialist because it's a popular word, but really they are opposite the socialists. They will run on a platform that they are anti-communist, anti-socialist. This is saying socialist and National Socialist is like saying butter and peanut butter. They are two very different things, even though they both contain the word butter, right? Nazi is from the original German, National Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. The National Socialist German Workers' Party. You probably should write down the English version of that, National Socialist German Workers' Party. Yes. National Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. The earliest Nazi group was a bunch of random unemployed people who met at bars because, well, they're German. And they would gripe and complain about the state of Germany today. They also created a new symbol, or rather, they used a symbol. There was the swastika. In Germany, it is the Hakenkreuz, literally a broken cross. And the idea is that the Christian cross broken by Jesus with the resurrection and Easter. It was originally a good symbol. Just like in Buddhism, it's still a good symbol. The Nazis took the swastika and used it because it's extremely simple, but it's extremely recognizable. It is easy to draw, and you know it when you see it. A little bit, and they flipped it one way. And then they have very simple colors, recognizable, German colors from the original German flag, the Prussian ideas. And it's here we introduce the most famous of the Nazis, Adolf Hitler. Adolf. Depends on how American you want to be. I go back and forth. It's Adolf if you're American. Adolf Hitler, this is the earliest photo of him, an infant in Braunau in Austria. And he had an abusive father and an extremely loving mother, and hated school, was very bad at it, tried to become an artist. He was also very bad at it. A weird kid, just very, very strange all around. The more you read, the more odd he becomes. German has informal pronouns and formal pronouns. And we don't really have something like that, but he insisted on calling everyone by the formal pronouns. It'd be like a kid running around going sir or madam. Like that, he was weird. Was not good with people. He probably had all of one friend throughout his life. He had a roommate when he moved to Vienna in Austria, and he ghosted on him after about a year. Never said another word about it. When war was declared, Hitler was ecstatic. This is from a rally in Munich when the war was announced, and that is Hitler. Probably the happiest you'll ever see him. He found a purpose in the war. For the first, that level of organization, that having people around him like that, it's the closest he had to friends. It's the closest he had to normalcy. He was odd. In the war, as we said, he was a courier, taking messages between different lines of the trenches. He was injured in a gas attack early on in the war. He was nearly killed by an Englishman. So as he's a courier running between trenches, an English soldier surprised him and had him in his sights, and then felt bad and decided to let him go. All of these moments of barely getting by or lucking out gave Hitler a sense of destiny, that this was meant to be, that he was meant to live through all this. And that really played on his ego. We said he was injured at the end of the war in a gas attack, and when he found out that Germany had surrendered, he went blind. But there was nothing wrong with his eyes. People think that this was a psychological thing where he was just so upset that he went blind. After the war, Hitler begs the army for a job, right? The army has been shrunk with the Treaty of Versailles. He doesn't have a job. He can't find anything. It's the Depression. So they're like, all right, we'll give you something to do. That new Nazi party, go and spy on them. See what they're doing. He goes to this bar because, again, they're Germans. And in that meeting, he's very bored. It's people talking about how Germany should be great again. How do you make Germany so it can get back on its feet? The Treaty of Versailles sucks, etc. Well, right before the end of the meeting, right before he's about to walk out, one guy stands up and says, no, we're wrong. Germany deserves what it got. Germany was so awful in the war, we deserve to be broken up into many pieces, and so there's never a Germany again. It's at this point Hitler goes off. Just rants and raves about how this guy is wrong. Germany is awesome. It will be awesome again. Germany deserves greatness. And he storms out. It's at that point the leader of the Nazi party chases after him, gives him a business card and says, man, you're good. You should come back. Call us back. Come to the next meeting. You can be good. It's here he learns that he has a natural identity as a rebel and is an excellent public speaker. He leads in the 20s what's called the beer hall putsch. Putsch is a word for rebellion, and why they don't translate it, I don't know. But Hitler goes to a beer hall in Munich because, well, they're Germans, and he kidnaps some of the local leaders who happen to be at that beer hall. Putsch is a rebellion. So he captures some of those local leaders who are at the beer hall, holds them at gunpoint, saying that this is a revolution. We are in charge now, until the police and the National Guard show up and there's a gunfight in the streets and Hitler and his cronies are captured. Question? Because, well, it's at a beer hall. Again, it's something we don't really have, but it's throughout Germany. Just massive cafeterias with a bar at the end. And it's just meant to be, it's beer and German culture goes back to the beginning. Yeah. Yes. Look at any Oktoberfest stuff. That's Germany for you. Yeah, no, so the beer hall, giant beer halls where everyone came together and ate and drank and were German. Well, Hitler is arrested and he's put on trial. And for treason against the state, he should have been exiled and kicked out of Germany. He wasn't German, he was Austrian. But he happened to find a judge that liked him. And so when it came time for sentencing, the judge goes, well, he should be expelled, but I like the guy. I like where his head's at. And so he puts him in a minimum security prison with the people he works with his fellow Nazis. And it's in this prison that he writes Mein Kampf, which means my struggle. It is his book that lists the plans for how to restore Germany. It is an awful read. Yeah, no, it's bad. It's all over the place. It's rambling, incoherent mess. Yeah, it's dumb. He randomly brings up syphilis on the 400th page and rants about that for 3 paragraphs. It's like, what are you talking about? But this book becomes a bestseller, and he becomes politically well known. And something that's very different about Hitler, and something that is not mentioned enough, is that he gains a lot of power by refusing to compromise. So all these other groups are coming around going, all right, these Nazis are up-and-comers, they're good, why don't we work together and we can have more power? And Hitler goes, no, I don't want to work together, because that means I would have to change what I believe to match with you. You can join us, or you can go away. And more often than not, those groups would eventually come around and join the Nazis. By simply refusing to budge, he wins all sorts of people. When the stock market crashes in the United States, things get even worse for Germany. Germans are desperate. And that's when the president, Paul von Hindenburg, a World War I hero, a hero of the Franco-Prussian War, it's amazing how that comes up again and again, invokes part of their constitution called Article 48. Article 48 is emergency powers for the president. The president can make the decisions the president wants to make and basically ignore their Congress, which is called the Reichstag. What? Yes. Reichstag, Congress, Parliament. I'm using them interchangeably even though, details. So the president rules by decree. Whatever the president wants, the president can do. Hitler keeps pushing that he and the Nazis have answers, but they are deliberately vague in how they're going to get those things. He promises everybody everything, and the next slide has a lot more about that. So, other than Hitler promised everything to everybody, don't worry about writing. Quote from a very good book on the topic. Hitler offered something to everyone. He offered work to the unemployed, prosperity to failed business people, profits to industry, expansion to the army, social harmony and an end of class distinctions to idealistic young students, the restoration of German glory to those in despair. He promised to bring order among chaos, a feeling of unity to all and the chance to belong to something. He would make Germany strong again, end payment of war reparations to the Allies, tear up the Treaty of Versailles, stamp out corruption, keep down Marxism, and deal harshly with the Jews. Odd twist at the end there. Well, it's like, okay, he's promising all these things that we would typically be like, oh, okay, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, that got anti-Semitic. Could he possibly deliver on all this? No. In fact, he doesn't even say how he's going to deliver on it. He appeals to all the classes. He promises whatever people want to hear. And it says even the name itself is meant to include everybody. National Socialist German Workers' Party. National for everyone. Socialist, bring in all those socialists who aren't really smart enough to realize there's a difference. German for the country. Pride, those people who wanted pride again. And workers, which is all of us. So, in 1930, the Nazis win 18% of the vote. They are the second largest party. 1932, Paul von Hindenburg is 84 years old and wants to retire. But he knows if he retires, Hitler will win the presidency. And von Hindenburg knows he doesn't want that. Von Hindenburg knows Hitler is not a good guy. It's in 1932, the Nazis win 37% of the vote, which is the highest they'll ever win. One of the biggest misconceptions in history. Hitler never wins the popular vote at any point. This is the most they ever win. It's good, but it's not a majority. So why is 37% such a big deal? Well, I think I explained it better than what I wrote here in my slide last year. In a parliament, in order to rule, you have to have 51% of the entire parliament. You have to have a majority, right? In a two-party system like we have, someone's going to have a majority. Like, it's really not possible not to. In a parliament where you have 5, 10, 20 parties, no one wins a majority. It's just too split up. You can't possibly win all those votes. So in just about every parliament, you have to have a coalition of a bunch of parties agreeing to work together to be that majority. If they can't get that coalition, they can't create that 51%, then the whole thing dissolves and they start over with going back and people voting again. Well, because of the Nazis being in there in a big chunk and refusing to compromise with anybody, they can't hit 51%. And they try it a bunch of times. And it just keeps going, well, we got to do it again, go back and vote. Well, we got to do it again, go back and vote. Imagine if in the 2016 election that we didn't get Congress the way it needed to be, so then we had December 2016 election. and January 2017 election, and February 2017 election. Wouldn't you get sick of it? Weren't you already sick of it come November? Imagine it just going on and on and on. This is what happened in Germany. And so people lose faith in the system, and they just get sick of it. They already didn't like the government. They know the government's messed up enough. But now they just completely screw it. I'm not even paying attention. So, how to stop this? How to stop this? The Nazis won't work with us. And we need to get them to get on board with something. The powers that be, including von Hindenburg, decide that they will try and control Hitler. All right, you think you can promise everybody everything? Let's see you try. People will realize within months that this guy is nothing but talk, and then we'll never hear from him again. So they give Hitler the chancellorship, which is basically like Speaker of the House to us, but higher. So there's the president, and then there's the chancellor. So they put Hitler in charge of the chancellorship, and they try and control him by not giving him any other cabinet position. So it's only him. They figure he's going to promise all these things, can't deliver on any of these things, and then he'll go away. Well, Hitler moans and complains until he gets a couple low-level cabinet positions, but much like the Stalin situation, those cabinet positions were jobs nobody wanted and had a lot of power when you really thought about it. Stuff about locating where funds go, where people are assigned, those kinds of jobs. The guy who orchestrates this is this man, Franz von Papen. He says that within 2 months we will have pushed Hitler so far into the corner that he'll squeak. Meanwhile, these were the rallies being held for Hitler. So you want to talk about some of the greatest mistakes in history? Then we get the Reichstag fire. The German Capitol building, home to the Reichstag, their Congress, is set on fire. February 27th, 1933. This is the German 9/11. This puts the German people feeling they're under attack. This leads to people wanting to mobilize to do something about it. The response from Germans is clear. The Reichstag is mostly destroyed, and in the fire, they find a young man named Marinus van der Lubbe. He's a communist, and he's rather groggy, a bit dazed. Perhaps was drugged and put there. There's a number of theories, even among the time, that the Nazis did this on purpose to gain power. He is blamed, and so are the communists. And this is where we get the Reichstag fire decree, which I deliberately put small because I know you're going to try and write it, and you don't need to write it. But listen. The Constitution of the German Reich is suspended until further notice. It is therefore permissible to restrict the rights of personal freedom, habeas corpus, freedom of expression and opinion, including freedom of the press, the freedom to organize and assemble, the privacy of the postal service, telegraphic and telephonic communications, warrants for house searches, orders for confiscations, as well as restrictions on property are also permissible beyond the legal limits otherwise prescribed. With the fire, Hitler passes the Emergency Act that will give him full power to restrict personal freedom, your ability to protest or get together in groups or even talk. It censors the mail and checks through letters, so you cannot even try and organize things outside of assembly. It taps the telephones. It allows searches through houses and anything they want to be confiscated. With this act, Hitler takes control and then outlaws opposing parties. We knew about this. This is what is said in the New York Times. Martial law for Germany. Move follows Reichstag fire and revelation of communist plot. So Hitler, enemy of the communists, blames the communists and takes control of everything in this emergency. So a few terms to know before we move on. Things we'll need to know up through World War II. So Führer, which you can change that umlaut to an E afterwards. That's the general way to do it if you don't have that key. Yes. Yes, these are terms that you should know. Führer is leader of the Nazis. It directly translates to leader. Officially, it's the combining of the presidency and the chancellorship. When von Hindenburg dies, Hitler holds a massive state funeral and says that to honor him, I am going to take his job, as well as being chancellor, to be the new Führer of the German people. Deutschland. It is Germany, but in German. Just like how Spain is España, just like Japan is Nippon. Lebensraum, a word I like to use. It means living room directly or living space. The Nazis said that the German people deserve more room for themselves because they should be allowed to grow and populate and therefore will need more room. And it's their big excuse to conquer the countries around them. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one empire, one leader. The Germans would say this, or the Nazis would say this as a slogan. They wanted one united Germany, made of ethnic Germans and only ethnic Germans, who follow Hitler. And then finally, one that you will unfortunately hear far too often, because in 2019, Nazism's a thing again. Sieg Heil. It is the thing said during the Nazi salute. It literally translates to conquer hail, or perhaps hailing to conquest is a better translation. That's what they keep saying. So some terms to know to understand what we're looking at as we look at some of these things. Now, Hitler was not subtle in any of this. You are now witnessing the beginning of a great epic in German history. This fire is the beginning. The German people have been soft for too long. Every communist official must be shot. All communist deputies must be hanged this very night. All friends of the communists must be locked up. And that goes for the Social Democrats and the Reichsbanner and all the other parties as well. So now Hitler has power. Let's look at the opening moves towards war.